So thank you very much. I will try to speak English slowly because I know it's not your native language. So thank you very much. I did spend many, many years living in Germany and in Belgium, so I'm used to talking to international audiences. Again, I'm Eric Howard. And we're going to talk a little bit about the community building projects, which, as you heard, are a little bit about friendship and hospitality and romance. I also want to talk or mention intergenerational and education. So it's not necessarily a bunch of older folks working together, but it's also helping the next generation understand the art and the technology and the ideas and the joy that comes together with doing timber framing. There on the top, we have a 1/4 scale English barn that we take to schools and conferences and agricultural fairs to introduce people to what is timber framing, because while they see the big building, they may not understand how it works and how it comes together. The other part is sometimes reaching out to important people. You may recognize this person. You may recognize Bono from U2. The other woman is Amy Grant. Amy Grant has a Hollywood star on the sidewalk in Hollywood. She's one of the best-selling Christian singers in the United States with more than 10 million records. And she also has a nonprofit organization in Nashville, Tennessee. And there you see her when her hair is brown, working on a project that we did for her to build this very large structure at her nonprofit organization, big enough for people to play basketball in. And we brought together about 40 timber framers as well as local people for 2 weeks to erect this structure in the Appalachian Mountains. The first community build was in 1989. As you saw in the program, the speaker on Sunday morning is Ted Benson. He was the director of that community build in 1989. You see the large community of people that they gathered about an hour north of Baltimore, Maryland. And the goal was to build these 2 houses for Habitat for Humanity. Habitat for Humanity builds houses for lower income people. And the people who were involved in building these houses still live in those houses 33 years later. The other project which was mentioned is the Guelph Bridge from 1992. 40 meters from end to end. About 350 people were involved in that. We did it at the Guild's annual conference in Ontario in 1992. It was so big they decided to never do anything like that again. So the saying in English is, don't bite off more than you can chew. There's probably a similar saying in Swedish. Is there one? Yeah. What is it? Anyway, you know the idea. But the bridge, again, it's still there. Now, a beautiful bridge over the river for pedestrians to go walking across, similar to the bridge right outside this building to cross the river to the other side. How does the Guild do these things? In general, the projects are done with a nonprofit organization or a government agency as our partner. It might be a county park system. It could be a historic site, a small town, maybe a college or university. In most cases, there's a local hero. You'll be hearing from one of these local heroes in a few minutes, Rick Collins. Our role at the Guild is we oversee the design and engineering. We hire a local person and 3 or 5 or 7 instructors. We help find the volunteers. Again, they're a mixture of experts and novices, people who are new. We buy the timber or work with the locals to find the timber locally. We get insurance so that if someone gets hurt, they're covered. Big issue in the United States. You're all familiar with lawsuits. And we also want to ensure that everybody has a safe time. Typically, the client or the customer will reimburse us for our direct costs and our indirect costs. They make sure everything's ready for us. The foundation is there. They provide food and housing and crane and security. And then they usually will have a general contractor to finish. Because as you know, a timber frame is not a finished structure. Someone needs to put on the roof. Someone needs to put on the walls. Someone needs to do the electricity and all that other stuff. The big challenges can be finding the volunteers, having a comfort level with the person you're working with. I'm sure you have that experience here in Scandinavia as well, where a general contractor is used to doing things a certain way, and bringing in timber framing is very different. And also when we're working with maybe a public government, they may have a requirement to put it out to public bid. And then the question is, okay, are we competing with our members for this project? And now, Rick, do you have your microphone? Yeah. So do you want to come up? While he's coming up, can all of the people who came from North America please stand up just so that others see who's here? There's several of us sort of spread around the audience. So it's really great to have a group. The Guild, our annual conference is in November of next year. Actually, no, it's this year. And we'd love to have you fly to Denver and be with us in Colorado for a few days or a week. We also have $1,000 scholarships available to young engineers. So if you have an engineer, we'd love to have you come along. And one of the ways we help recruit people is to give everybody a free t-shirt. So Ulrich, this is a t-shirt for you. And on the back is some free advertising for the sponsors of this particular event, which was a mill project in 2019. And I think it's your size. So now I will pass it on to Rick.
Thanks, Eric. There's so much to say about this particular part of our organization. I got involved in the Guild in 1996, and I went on to work for the Guild for almost 20 years. I've spent all of my life building timber frames now. I'm 50, and my entire career has revolved around this industry. And I come from a part of the country that is fairly isolated from this industry. And so because of that, I had to develop a lot of my own programs, and I had to do a lot of initiative to bring the Guild into our area. And over the years, I independently hosted as a local hero over 20 Guild projects in the area that we call the Midwest, which is, Chicago is sort of the center of that. I live about 3 hours west of Chicago. So I don't have very long to compress 20 years of experience in the Guild and Guild projects into 7 minutes. But I do have some slides, and what has always been fundamentally important to us is education. And it's not just the education of the craftsperson, but it's the education of the community. It's the education of the other professionals in our circle, which include people like engineers and architects and draftspeople. So we have tried to tie all of our projects, not just into how do we build, how do we draw, how do we lay out. It involves everything from first aid to forklifts to aerial lift equipment to basic engineering, basic drafting, business, things about estimating, things about contracts. So my focus was professional development workshops. I was very involved in the apprenticeship and journey worker formation in our country. So this is one of the first professional development workshops I hosted in 2004. And we talk about forestry, we talk about trees. I've ran a sawmill in our facility for 30 years now almost. So we talk about timber processing from the forest to the shop. We talk about the engineering and the architecture, so we do classroom. And in professional development, we bring in other trades, people like architects, people like engineers, people like plumbers, and we have conversations about how we're going to proceed with building. So that's what these slides are about. It's classroom, it's forestry, it's in the shop, it's at the sawmill. Is there an arrow?
That one here.
Sorry, I'm losing my eyesight these days, which is tough for a carpenter now. So I've been a carpenter my whole life. That's what I do. I spent my whole life learning how to be a timber frame carpenter. And this is also one of our guild projects. This is an oak building that we built for a community, and it was a park district. So quite often we get calls from park districts to build buildings. So here's the naked building and the drawings. So we did this project for a community, and we processed all the material, which means we milled it ourselves, and we did the drawings, we did the engineering, and all of this was part of that particular workshop. And we use joinery for the most part. Mechanical fasteners, steel fasteners have come into play for us a little bit more these days, but by and large, the bulk of what we're doing is joinery. And it's generally speaking full timber frame structures. And, we use a fair bit of hydraulic equipment, so we use a lot of cranes on these events, partially because of time, but we also have done and continued to do hand raisings. Aerial equipment, like you see here, this man lift, scissor lift here, these kinds of things are very important for us as far as volunteers go, because from the safety perspective, we need to be able to get people into the air easily. Part of my training has become a train the trainer. So at these events, I will often teach the forklift, the aerial training, and I can give people a certificate for that training. And we try to have people leave these events not just with knowledge about timber framing and cutting, joinery, but using forklifts, using machines, using aerial equipment, elevated equipment, and we try to give people what we call tickets, so that when they leave these events, they have something that they can take back to their workplace that increases their value to their employer. So we've got cutting going on here, and site cutting, and then site installation. That's the finished building. It's quite large. We did this in 2 weeks. Typically, we have something like 60 to 250 people who come to these events, and as small as 15. So here's an event that's much smaller. We did this one on my farm. And as time went on, as is natural, we make things a little bit more complicated. And so this particular project is done without tape measures. It's all scribing. There's no paper involved. It's all lofted from the floor. So we can do things that are fairly complex. In these workshops, this is a 10-day workshop to build something that is essentially done by just drawing it on the floor with chalk and then taking all that up into space without doing any paper drawings. It's based on geometry. And so, it's nice to be able to bring in experts from other areas. So the person that came for this event, we brought in from England. And then that's the second guy down here. The third guy down is an engineer. The fourth set of pictures here are architects. So we bring architects and engineers to speak at these events as well. And we try to make this sort of all-encompassing. So it's not just about the building of the building. And it involves a lot of teaching, again, that goes far beyond just cutting the wood. Cutting the wood is the easy part. The other things involved in building these buildings are the more complex things. And this was made with 13 different hardwood species that we sawed so we sawed all this material at the same time as well. And it is about people and community. And over the years, I've trained thousands of carpenters. And I think that that's the most important part of this. I've trained thousands of carpenters and interacted with tens of thousands of people at these events who leave these events with an idea in their head about how things can be different. And the most important thing about what it is that we do is that we share our passion with these people. We share our belief that this is truly a good way to build. We believe it to our core. And that's what people walk away with. That's what ends up in the newspaper articles. It ends up in social media now. It ends up on television. People walk away with the energy of what it is that we do. And that's what this is about. And that's what our mission in the Guild was about. I haven't been involved in the Guild for a number of years, but for almost 2 decades, I spent a lot of time and energy out presenting this message to people because we really, truly believe it. It is about the people. And, we've done quite a few restoration workshops as well. This is just a shot of that. And I think that that's it. I had something to refute that Eric said. We ended up building a bigger bridge than the one he mentioned. We did that in 2001. So the Golden Kicking Horse Bridge, which was actually supposed to be my last slide, instead of this one, is a bigger bridge. And we did it with several hundred people in 3 weeks. So just wanted to, clear the record there.
Okay. I will say these slides, I believe, will all be available. Is that correct? Or I can make them available.
And it's going to be recorded
on this video. So the slides will all be recorded. The last few slides, I just wanted to show some of the calculations and some of the process we go through so that you have an understanding about how the community builds work. So one question is, how many people do you need? And so we begin by saying, okay, for this particular structure, these are the pieces that need to get made. This is the size of the pieces in inches, of course. How many? So 239 pieces of wood. How much wood? All of the wood's also going to need to be stained. That takes time. Each piece of wood is going to have joinery put into it. All the number of joints, 267. All of this is going to take 500 hours. And based on 500 hours with 24 volunteers and 6 instructors, we can do it in 2.5 days. And so that is the process. Obviously, it's an Excel spreadsheet. There are all sorts of formulas behind it with assumptions. And depending on which volunteers you have, you may only need 20 volunteers. The thing you want to avoid is on the last day to have a building that's half done. Because that's sort of awkward to tell your client, well, actually the building's not done yet. Or to talk to the instructors and say, can you stay another 3 days so we can finish this project? Because these folks have the roofer coming on Wednesday to put the roof on. And so the building needs to be up in the air for the roofer to put the roof on. And so that's the installation part and the total combined hours. But that's sort of the background that comes together. The other question, of course, is what is it that we at the Guild do versus what does the client do? And sometimes you need to be very careful because your site is not near anything. So here's a lovely building in the middle of Suriname in South America. You can't just call up Home Depot or the equivalent and say, oh, we need another box of tools, because the nearest good road is 2 hours away. The nearest airport is 8 hours away. And then from there, they have to fly to Panama to the United States. And so this is really important in terms of the planning. When we're putting together a proposal, there are things that the Guild will do. And I'm going to go through this just so that it's all recorded on the camera. These are the things, some of the things that the Guild does. We will do the workshop. We will work with the town or whoever to publicize it. We will develop the plan. We will design the plan, the structure. We will create fabrication drawings. We will hire project managers and assure that we have the right tools. We're also going to work with the sawmill locally to make sure we have the wood at the right specifications and the wood is delivered on the right day. We're going to recruit the instructors and the volunteers. We will then fabricate and install the frame, apply the oil, put together the connectors so that the frame is attached to the foundation. Maybe install some temporary materials. If the roofer is not going to show up for 2 months, you want to have the roof, at least some coverage. Obviously, the safety plan in case there's going to be, there's an accident. And then working with the other service providers. So those are the things that the Guild does. And what does the town do, or the nonprofit organization? Well, one is they actually talk to us and communicate with us to make sure everything flows correctly. They make sure that there are not 20 people roaming around the site because the neighbors all want to see what's happening. We work with them because sometimes, as part of an educational component, they want to bring in the local media. They want to bring in the local representatives from the town, or members of Congress, or in your case, members of Parliament. And that's all part of the outreach and building a community and making greater awareness about timber framing. Because one of our long-term goals is we would love to have 5 other entities call up our members and say, I want a timber frame house. Because that suddenly creates 5 new jobs that weren't there beforehand. They will work with us with media outreach, provide workspace. They rent a tent for us to work under. They will maybe bring in the forklift and the scaffolding and the cranes. In general, you can't put up a building in the United States without permits. And so the client is responsible for the permits. Sometimes there's no electricity, and so they need to bring in the electricity instead of us being responsible for that. There have been times when it's a new foundation and there's this much mud, and it's no fun to walk through the mud for a week. And so we want to make sure that the ground is well sloped, because if it does rain the entire time, which happens, we're not playing in the mud for a week. The other interesting thing is they feed us. So we show up and every day they're bringing us breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 20 people, for 40 people, for 75 people. There's places for us to sleep for camping. They have portable toilets for us to use, all those kinds of things. Some of our members, you may experience this, they do enjoy drinking alcohol. And so we need to have permission to drink alcohol if it's a public park. Sometimes they say no, sometimes they say yes. In the evening, if people are camping, they like to have a campfire. So do we have permission to do a campfire? So those are all the kinds of things that we're addressing. And that is my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.